Welcome back, language enthusiasts. Are you ready to conquer the speaking exam in either the B2 First or the C1 Advanced Cambridge English exam? Well, you're in the right place. I'm Izzy from English with Izzy, and today I'm going to spill the beans on the ultimate game-changing strategies for the Speaking Part 1 interview questions. Now, whether you're just starting to prepare for your exam, or you've been working towards that certificate for a while, perhaps you're a Cambridge English exam preparation teacher and you want to make sure that your students are really understanding the exam, well, this video is going to be your secret weapon. But it's going to get even better because these aren't just your average textbook tips. What I'm going to be sharing with you today comes straight out of my student favorite Cambridge exam preparation online course, which I have been fine-tuning over the last few years. So if you're ready to supercharge your speaking skills and walk into that exam feeling really confident because you're very well prepared and you know what the examiners are going to expect from you, then stick around because we're going to dive deep into the world of Speaking Part 1 for Cambridge English exams. Let's dive right in. So let's start with speaking part 1. Speaking part 1 is called the interview part because that's exactly what's going to happen. The examiner is going to interview you by asking you 3 or maybe 4 short questions about yourself. They will ask you an individual question, you will answer it, and then they will ask your partner a question and they will answer it. In this part of the exam, you are not going to talk to your partner, you're just going to respond to the questions that the examiners ask you. This part of the exam is about 2 minutes long, so it will really be over before you know it. Because this part is called the interview part and it's so short, people tend to think that it's unimportant or that there is no strategy, but that could not be further from the truth. And because it's so short, that is exactly why you have to use that time to prove to the examiner that you know what you're doing, okay? And that's why strategy is absolutely fundamental here. So let's get down to the important information. As you can see here from this diagram, you're going to be sitting next to your speaking partner. In front of you, there's going to be an examiner, and behind, kind of in the corner, there's going to be another examiner. The only person who's going to speak to you during the speaking exam is the examiner who is in front of you and also your partner next to you. So you should not even interact with the other examiner. When you enter the room for the first time, please say hello to both examiners, okay? Be friendly because that will leave a really good impression. Aside from that, you don't need to talk to the other examiner that's at the back of the room. Let's start with the questions that are absolutely guaranteed to come up in the exam. As soon as you sit down, the examiner is going to ask you to hand in your mark sheets and they are definitely going to ask you for your name. This is probably the only question where you're going to give a really short answer, and you can simply answer it by saying, hello, I'm Izzy, or my name is Izzy, okay? Nothing longer than that. And the second question that they're going to ask you is where you're from. A lot of people, they get quite nervous and they say, I'm from Oxford. You know, they throw the name of their city into the answer and they stop there. But I really recommend doing what I'm going to also explain further in the rest of this video. I really recommend that you give a very complete answer. This is one of the most important tips in the speaking exam, and I'm going to give you an example right now. Look at this example answer, which is what I would answer because I am from Oxford. If the examiner asked me, where are you from? I would say, I'm from Oxford, which is a small historic town in the southeast of England and is famous for being the home of the oldest English-speaking university in the world. As you can see, I've mentioned not only the place, but I've mentioned exactly where it is in England, and I've mentioned one characteristic about the town, right? It's famous for this, so that when I give my answer to the examiner, they have a really good idea of my city. I don't just say, I'm from Oxford, but they really understand a lot more about it. And that's exactly what you're going to do as well. Now, this is a strategy that you're going to apply to every single part of both the speaking and the writing exam, which is not to give really short and boring answers, but, to make your point and then go on to give some extra information. You're going to do this for the rest of the questions in, the whole speaking exam, but also in the writing exam. You should never just throw in an answer without justifying it or explaining it further. So this is a really important strategy in the whole of your exam. So regarding the question, where are you from? This is a really good template you can use. If you don't like it, or you already have a really good answer for this question, you don't have to follow it word from word, but it's definitely a format that works every time. So what you can say is, I'm from, you give the name of the town, the city, the village, whatever type of place it is, which is a, and you can now start to give some good descriptive adjectives about this place. So I said it's a small historic town. I mentioned 2 adjectives. If you're taking a C1 exam, you should really try to use some good C1 adjectives, because you want to really show to the examiner that you have a good range of vocabulary. You might say it's a quaint city, it's a manic city, really understand what your city is like so you can describe it well in the exam. And then you're going to say, it's a city, it's a town, whatever, in the, and then I recommend mentioning exactly where it is geographically. You could say it's in the northeast, the southwest, in the center of the country that you're from. And now this is just a suggestion. You could say it's famous for, or it's known for this. If it's not famous for anything, you don't have to use this exact phrase, but giving a bit of extra information, whatever it may be, is definitely important in this part of the exam. All right, guys, we're going to focus on the really important stuff now, which are the 3 key strategies to do really well in speaking part 1. We're going to talk about the phrase list, which you can download here. We're going to talk about what I've already mentioned, which is making a point and giving extra information. And my super vocabulary tip, which I'm going to talk about, is using 3 keywords. But let's start with the phrase list. I've compiled this list of phrases because when native speakers speak English, there's a selection of phrases that we use all the time, which are more colloquial, which will make you sound much more natural and much more native when you're giving your answers in the exam. Remember that this is a speaking exam, and the most important thing here is that you sound really fluid and really natural when you're speaking, which is why it's really important to use, colloquial phrases, native phrases, idioms, expressions, and things like this. And I've put them all together here so you can literally copy them, paste them, and put them at the beginning of your answers. I recommend using one phrase for every single speaking answer that you're going to give in speaking part 1, and I want to give you an example of why it's really good. So look at this first question, which is, what is your job? You could say, I'm a balloon twister. I know it's a really unusual job, however, I'm an extremely jolly person, so it suits me perfectly. It also comes with lots of perks, so I can't complain. Now, this is obviously already a really good answer, but listen to this one. It's funny you asked me that, as I was just talking to my friend about my bizarre job. Now, as you can see, by putting this, it's funny you asked me that, I've just added this more personal twist, right? Because it shows that I'm talking to the examiner like I'm really listening to their question. I want them to relate to me like I'm talking to them like a friend, not like I've just memorized my answer. Okay? Let's look at another example now. Imagine they ask you the question, what's the furthest you've ever been from home? Now you could say, once I went to Thailand, I think it's the furthest I've ever been. It's quite a short answer, very boring. It's not really showing off your range of vocabulary. Now look at this one. I'm really fond of traveling. I'm a seasoned traveler actually, and when I was a youngster, I went backpacking in Thailand. That's where all the adrenaline junkies were going at the time. Although I was traveling on a shoestring, I managed to fund my 2-week trip to Thailand, which is 3,000 kilometers from home and the furthest I've ever been so far. This is a really good example of a very complete answer. And as you can see, I started my answer by saying I'm really fond of, which is synonymous for I really like. At C1 level, we don't want to be using words like, love, okay? Because we really want to show that we have a really good grasp of the language, which is why we need to replace those more basic words with words like this, I'm fond of, because that's what native people use. And if you're at C1 level, you should try to be using these as well. So don't forget, Try to use one speaking phrase before every answer in the interview part. The next thing we're going to talk about is the strategy I mentioned before, which is make your point and give extra information. Always give extra information, okay? Don't give short or boring answers because the examiner is going to want more from you. So let's look at this one. The examiner asked me, "What's your job?" I start by using my phrase, right? It's funny you asked me that, as I was just talking to my friend about my bizarre job. Now my answer is, I'm a balloon twister. But I'm not going to stop there because I want them to be informed. I want them to understand what my job is and why I like it. So then I'm going to say, I know it's a really unusual job. However, I'm an extremely jolly person, so it suits me perfectly. It also comes with lots of perks, so I can't complain. As you can see, I've given 4 extra pieces of information about my job, so the examiner is fully informed. They understand exactly what I do and why I like it. So there's no missing information here. Let's look at the second question. What's the furthest you've ever been from home? Again, I'm going to start with my phrase, I'm really fond of traveling. I'm a seasoned traveler. This is my extra information. I'm a seasoned traveler. When I was a youngster, I went backpacking in Thailand. I'm giving background information about the place that I went to. That's where all the adrenaline junkies were going at the time. Although I was traveling on a shoestring, I managed to fund my 2-week trip to Thailand, which is 3,000 kilometers from home. This is my point, right? This is the fundamental answer to the question. What's the furthest you've been? Thailand. So I said, I managed to fund my 2-week trip to Thailand, which is 3,000 kilometers from home and the furthest I've ever been so far. I kind of did this one backwards because I gave my extra information first and I made my point at the end. But it doesn't matter because I've supported my main opinion by keeping the examiner informed. And this is a much less boring answer, right? I could have said Thailand, but I'm not showing the examiner that I know how to interact with them. So that's why we have to give a complete answer so it feels natural. You know, just like when you're with a friend, if you ask them a question and they respond with just one word, it's like, okay, you're kind of boring. I don't know how to have this conversation with you. That's why we have to do this. Okay, you want them to be informed. You want them to enjoy what you're saying. And most importantly, we need to justify what we're saying and try to show off some good vocabulary as well. Last but not least, I generally recommend to my students that they learn 3 keywords for as many vocabulary topics as possible. A lot of people kind of fall into the trap of memorizing answers for their exam, which is a really bad idea because you don't sound very natural and you're just not 100% sure of what the examiner is going to ask you on that day. So a good trick is, opening your Cambridge textbook, having a look at the different topics that appear in it, and finding 3 really good words, really good phrases, expressions related to that topic. So if they ask you any question or if you have to talk about photos related to this topic, you don't have to memorize 5,000 different words related to that topic, but you have 3 really good, really impressive C1 pieces of vocabulary ready to fire at the examiner. So let's go back to the same questions that we looked at before. What's your job? I know that the examiner is probably going to ask me about what I do, my job, university of some kind. So before going into the exam, I prepared 3 really good words, which I know I want to use in any topic about work and about me. So the questions I chose were bizarre, which means strange or weird. I chose jolly, which is a C1 synonym for happy. And I chose perks, which means, the advantages of a job. Now, all of these are really good C1 words, which is why I chose to write these down. And when I ask you to do your exercise of writing down some C1 words, I want you to make sure that they are of a high level. Let's go back to the same question. What's your job? It's funny you asked me that, as I was just talking to my friend about my bizarre job. Because I went into the exam knowing I was going to use this word, I used it, I impressed the examiner, and I gave my complete answer. Well, I'm a balloon twister. I know it's a really unusual job, however, I'm an extremely jolly person, so it suits me perfectly, and it also comes with lots of perks, so I can't complain. So remember, don't memorize answers, but start learning 3 really, really good words, phrases, or expressions for a whole variety of topics in English. Let's look at this next question. What's the first thing you notice about people when you meet them for the first time? The phrases I've chosen to prepare before the exam were painfully perceptive, which means extremely perceptive, body language, and to look past. So I put a really good C1 phrasal verb here. It's funny you asked me that. So I'm using my natural speaking phrase, as right before the speaking exam, I was talking to my friend about this. Now, I'm a painfully perceptive person, and one of the first things I pay attention to when meeting someone new is their smile. I think body language is extremely important, and it's hard for me to look past a fake or uncomfortable smile. So that's the last point I really want you to take into consideration and to help you really show off your language to the examiner without stressing too much, and thinking I have to use 5,000 different words if they ask me about this topic. No, just have a handful of really good words and that's all you need. The 3 things I want you to remember are to use your natural speaking phrases, to make your point and to give extra information, and last but not least, try to think of at least 3 really good words that you can use in the topic of the question. The last thing to bear in mind, as I'm sure you saw from the videos before, your answers should be about 2 sentences long, okay? Enough time to make your point, to give extra information. But because this is just the interview part, your answers should not be too long, okay? So they're going to last about 20 seconds. And there you have it, language learners. I hope you found these strategies useful and that they've managed to give you some insight and at least a little bit of confidence on how you're supposed to be facing part 1 of your speaking exam. But I've got an extra treat for you. I know how important it is to get your hands on the right resources and ones which go straight to the point so you don't waste your time preparing for this exam. So what I'm going to do is give you access to a free sample of my course. I call it a sample, but there are hours of useful strategies in this. So it's the perfect way to dip your toes into what could be a life-changing exam preparation course. I'm going to drop the link in the video description below so you can start watching it right away if you want to. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell so whenever I release a new video, which is every single Monday, then you'll be the first to know when it comes out, because it would be really sad if all I'm doing is creating these videos for my grandparents to watch them. So hit that button, you know you want to. Also, if you could do me a favor and share this video with just one friend who's also preparing for their Cambridge English exam, you might be helping them out more than you realize. Anyway, that's it for today, guys. Thank you for joining me and sitting through this video and investing your time in your own education, which is always a fantastic thing to do. I can't wait to see you in the next lesson, but until then, stay curious, stay learning.